You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 583, Body and Soul.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we have a shared experience with each other and our listeners, viewing an episode of Star Trek and picking it apart for the morals, meanings, and messages, and then we ask each other if it stands the test of time.
This week, Body and Soul, the one where Seven and the Doctor spend time together in the closest of quarters, but what's a little consciousness swapping among friends.
I'll be right back with trivia, but before that, Norman will remind all of you how to reach us.
In my body and my soul, I want to say that we'd love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and on Instagram and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with your near-daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help your favorite podcasts is to leave a 5-star rating and a review at Apple or your preferred podcast platform. And remember, your comments could be used on the show. And now here's John Champion with this week's trivia.
All right, we have a story by Michael Taylor, and we know Michael's name as a frequent Star Trek writer since his days on DS9 with episodes like The Visitor and In the Pale Moonlight. The most recent of his contributions to Voyager that we discussed was Drive, but the teleplay task for this one went to other writers, those being Eric Morris and, separated with the word and, Phyllis Strong and Mike Sussman, joined with an ampersand. Yeah, that tells you in the credits who actually worked together versus collectively on a script. So this episode is Eric's only Trek credit, but he did go on to create the Bruce Campbell historical adventure comedy Jack of All Trades. But for our purposes, we will turn our attention here to Phyllis and Mike, who are credited by Ken Biller for really doing the rewrite on this episode. And their efforts were rewarded with staff positions as story editors for the remainder of the season. And both, of course, would go on with Trek through Enterprise. Now, this is directed by Robert Duncan McNeil, and we all know Robbie's work as an actor, and we all know that he has spun off into a very successful directing career. This episode marks the last of his directorial jobs on Voyager, but he does pick right back up with 4 more outings on Enterprise, and as of this recording, he is still going strong with shows under his belt like Resident Alien, The Orville, True Lies, and many more. Let's meet our guest stars. Marva Hicks is back as Tuvok's wife T'Pel, at least as a holographic simulation of T'Pel. We first saw Marva in the role back in the Voyager second season episode Persistence of Vision, and we lost Marva in 2002. We spend most of our time with 2 Locarians. There's the Captain, Rannoch, played by Fritz Sperberg, and you'd have to look pretty deep under the Jem'Hadar makeup to recognize Fritz from the first time we saw him as Ixtana Rax in the DS9 episode One Little Ship. Then there's Jaren, who wears many hats for the Locarians. She's played by Megan Gallagher, also a returning Niner. We first met Megan when she played Mariel in Invasive Procedures, and then we saw her in her fully human look as Nurse Garland in the episode Little Green Men. Now, for both Fritz and Megan, this episode marks the end of their Star Trek guest star appearances, so far at least.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. Can we interest you in a body? It's only a loner body, but it has low mileage.
Prologue. Away in the Delta Flyer, Harry Kim, 7 of 9, and the Doctor are on a mission chasing comets. Well, it's more than that, really. They're detecting early building blocks of life hidden in those comets. For Seven and Harry, it's all business, but the Doctor is excited by the poetry and romance of discovery. The shuttle quakes, though, as an unknown spacecraft closes in and opens fire on the flyer. Act 1. Harry hails the attacking ship with a friendly greeting, but doesn't get a friendly answer. The Lokiram accuse the flyer crew of harboring a photonic insurgent, meaning the Doctor. Harry tries to explain that he's just their holographic CMO, but the Lokiram respond with more weapons fire that disables the flyer's thrusters and comms. Before long, they're caught in a tractor beam and hit with a disruption field that starts tearing apart the Doctor's program. Desperate, he begs Seven to save him. When the Lokiram board the flyer, they assure Harry that they just want the insurgent, but in the aft compartment they find only Seven. She claims the Doctor was destroyed, but she secretly got his mobile emitter, calling it a portable regeneration unit. The Lokiram aren't convinced and confiscate everything, the emitter, the comet samples, and Harry and Seven themselves. They're arrested and hauled off to the Lokiram ship. Locked in a cell, Harry tries to assess their options, and he mourns the Doctor's apparent destruction, but Seven suddenly delivers a familiar line with a bit of flair. The Doctor is alive, inside her. Turns out she downloaded his program into her own cybernetic matrix. With her consciousness suppressed, the Doctor is fully in control and fully enjoying the perks of having a physical body for the first time, breathing, touching, smelling, even if his first real whiff is Harry's sweaty uniform. Act 2. On Voyager, Tom checks in on a very sweaty and very twitchy Tuvok, who's clearly going through something. Tom thinks it's a virus, but Tuvok hints broadly enough for Tom to figure out what it really is. Ponfar. The Doctor had prepared a compound to manage it discreetly, and now Tuvok needs it. Tom agrees to replicate the treatment and promises to tell Janeway it's the Tarkelian flu. Crisis averted for now, as long as those Vulcan hormones stay in check. Back on the Lokiram ship, Harry is miserable with the prison rations, while the Doctor, still in Seven's body, is having the time of his life, savoring every bite and bogarting Harry's share too. He even suggests a holographic stomach when they get back to Voyager so he can continue to enjoy the physical sensation of food. Seven is summoned to the flyer, where the Lokiram captain Rannoch questions Seven about their tech. When asked to demonstrate the replicator, the Doctor goes for cheesecake and reacts in culinary ecstasy. Still suspicious, but intrigued, Rannoch joins in. One slice turns into a full-blown buffet binge, complete with drinks and oversharing. The Doctor, as Seven, even tells a sob story to guilt Rannoch into returning the Doctor's mobile emitter because it's a regeneration device, of course. Later, still tipsy Doctor stumbles back into the cell with the emitter in hand. Harry quickly helps him re-upload it using Seven's Borg tubules. Once the Doctor is back in his own holographic skin, Seven snaps out of it, and she is not happy. She remembers everything. Act 3. Understandably, Seven is furious. The Doctor's experience in her body, the booze, flirting, and the whole cheesecake, has left her nauseated and indignant. She refuses to host him again, but Harry argues that they need the Doctor hidden to pull off their escape. She relents, and the plan is set. With the Doctor in control, Seven's mind can memorize the Lokiram's command protocols, and they'll try to signal Voyager. In the Lokiram sickbay, the Doctor, as Seven, bonds with Jaren, part tactical officer, part engineer, part medic. Everyone is stretched thin in their conflict with the photonics. Jaren reveals a little about her family's experience with their photonic turning against them. And even in that discomfort, the Doctor can't help but feel a little spark of personal interest in her. Meanwhile, on Voyager, Tuvok's Ponfar is raging, and the meds Tom gives him don't help. Tom suggests a novel therapy, a holographic T'Pel as a workaround. At first, Tuvok balks on moral grounds, but Tom reminds him it's not cheating if it's your wife and a holodeck. Reluctantly, Tuvok agrees. The timing is bad, though. A Lakirim patrol ship detects the photonic activity of Tuvok's hologram and opens fire. Janeway is not amused. She disables their weapons and offers a choice: escort Voyager peacefully or get blown to bits. The Lakirim wisely choose the escort, but only after the holodeck is shut down, leaving Tuvok disoriented. Back in the first Lakirim ship, the Doctor, as Seven, continues to flirt with Jaren, but when Jaren tries to set her up with her brother, the vibe crashes hard. Then Rannoch summons Seven to the bridge for mood lighting, drinks, and a front row seat to pulsar vibrations. When he leans in for a kiss, the Doctor recoils and shoves him into a console. Rannoch apologizes, but Seven storms off in disgust. Act 4. The Doctor, still piloting Seven's body, returns to the Lakirim sickbay rattled from the encounter with Rannoch. As he vents to Jaren, he winces when he pulls Seven's trapezius. Jaren offers a shoulder massage. It's innocent, until it's not. The Doctor, a little too into it, suddenly realizes he's getting aroused in someone else's body. He backs away, and Jaren chalks it up to Seven's secret, that she's part Borg. Oh, that. Then a call comes in. Harry is very ill. In the brig, the Doctor, as Seven, finds Harry groaning on the floor, but it's a fake-out, just a way to get the guard out and the Doctor back. He's annoyed at how long the Doctor's been gone, but the Doctor says progress is being made. Trust the process. Back in the emitter, and once again himself, the Doctor gets an earful from Seven. She's not thrilled about the kiss, the massage. He pushes back, though. Why does she deny herself any pleasure? He'd give anything for the kind of experience she wastes. Harry steps in to bring the conversation back to their escape. Oh yeah, Seven's got the command codes, and the Flyer's transceiver could transmit them to Voyager. Problem is, the Flyer is under heavy guard. So the Doctor has a new plan. Back in Seven's body, he talks Rannoch into a private chat aboard the Flyer. Once there, the Doctor offers a drink, makes a toast, and waltzes him around the aft compartment before jabbing him in the neck with a sedative. Meanwhile, on Voyager, Tuvok struggles through Pon farr while back at work on the bridge. Janeway, quietly aware of his discomfort, promises a long holodeck session once they get the away team back. Neelix drops by with a bland Talaxian soup to help Tuvok's, flu. Just then a hail comes in from the Flyer. The Doctor, as Seven, relays their situation and transmits the Lakirim ship command codes. With that, Janeway has Tuvok disable the escort ship and sets course for the Flyer. Act 5. In the Lakirim sickbay, Jaren revives Rannoch, who immediately has Seven taken into custody. But Voyager's just shown up on sensors. Rannoch and Jaren head to the bridge, dragging the Doctor, as Seven, along. Janeway hails and demands her crew and shuttle back. Rannoch refuses, accusing them of smuggling of photonic and biogenic material. Janeway doesn't argue. She just drops their shields with the override code. Rannoch responds by tying shield power to the warp core, making any weapons fire a death sentence for the away team. When the Lakirim shoot their way out of a tractor beam, Janeway has a backup plan. Send a message directly to Seven's cortical node. That's the Doctor's cue. He transfers back into his emitter, stunning the Lakirim with his sudden appearance. Seven takes down a guard, grabs a weapon, and hands it to the Doctor while she works on disabling the shields. Unfortunately, the Lakirim turn the tables, disarm the Doctor, and Rannoch damages the controls just as Seven has destabilized the grid. She warns Rannoch that his attempts will overload the system, but he does anyway and winds up severely injured. The Doctor rushes to help. Jaren protests, but he reminds her of her feelings for Rannoch, and she lets him treat the wounded captain. Rannoch will be fine, and it's time to clear the air about who's really whom and where those feelings might be misplaced. Jaren admits the Doctor is probably not her brother's type, and while she may still have reservations about photonics, she has to admit that the EMH is a talented doctor. Later, Tuvok tells Tom the holodeck solution got him through Pon farr, though nothing replaces the real T'Pel. After all, Tom's holodeck version had ears that were 4 millimeters taller than the real deal. In sickbay, Seven brings foie gras and Chateau de Cume. Since he can't taste them, she offers to describe every sensation as she eats, and they raise their glasses to shared experiences. The end.
I loved your recap, John, and usually I don't pull out a notepad or pencil. Well, I really should actually just put it on my phone. But there were a couple things that I had to jot down.
By the way, I really respect that when you do notes for Mission Log, you are doing those by hand in a notebook with a pen or pencil. It honestly is a habit that I need to get back into because I don't want that skill to get rusty.
I credit everything to our own Dom, Dr. Severn, on Discord.
Yeah.
A lot of D's in there, so, that kind of plays out.
Yes.
As we say, the D, in Discord.
Yes.
Here are a couple things that I thought were really neat.
Okay.
So, adding to our ever-growing list of Tuvok action figure variants.
Yeah.
You just added Sweaty Tuvok and Twitchy Tuvok.
Twitchy Tuvok.
I love that.
Yeah. Sweaty and twitchy. He's Ponfar Tuvok.
Ooh, so much.
So
much Tuvok.
Yeah. We need that as an action figure for sure.
Before we get started, one thing, though, that came later on in your recap, and I do think that this is probably the best album name that we've had in a long time, would be Pulsar Vibrations.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
Right?
That definitely... It's probably an album that, like, Alan Parsons never
exactly.
put out.
Oh, my God. You just reached into my brain. Kind of like the way that Reg did to Seven in the last episode.
The way Hollow Reg did to Seven. Oh, that was disturbing.
Alan Parsons Project, nothing like Asia. Yes, that kind of that genre. So but definitely Alan Parsons Project, for sure.
Well, thanks, man. Glad that it was a good exercise. All right.
I am loving the CGI effects in this season of Voyager. I love that comet. I don't know why. It was just a brief opening establishing shot, but it was just really good looking.
A lot of good stuff in here. Yeah, exactly. I do like, we established early on that Seven is aware of her sense of humor. So by saying something like she recommends to Harry that they deactivate the Doctor's vocal processor, great.
Right. Yep. But Seven kind of smirked a little bit about that line that Harry said. And is that a sense of humor that's foreshadowing?
Oh, maybe. Maybe.
She would just kind of like straight up eye roll that, but it was interesting.
Right. Now, interesting because this is not the first time that we've been around people for whom photonic life forms might be a problem.
Right.
We met a homicidal photonic life form before. So I like that this is a theme that we get to revisit. Kind of cool. And just from the very start, we are in early Act 1, and Jerry Ryan is absolutely capturing playing the Doctor's personality. Bravo. I think this is going to be a familiar refrain as we discuss the episode. Little note of trivia here that Bob Picardo performed those scenes on tape, so then Jerry could watch those and do the mannerisms and really, nail that performance. And by the way, I also really like in the earlier scenes the subtlety of trying to hide that fact from their captors and then the reveal to Harry. Because obviously we as the audience know that something is off. We probably know exactly why, but just letting there be at least a little bit of a build for the people around her, great.
Yeah, I'm holding kind of like all of my comments about Jerry's performance like to the end because, yes, it's going to be like basically, look at that scene, look at this scene, look at that scene.
Yeah, exactly.
At timestamp, though, at 6 minutes, 57 seconds, the Doctor, as Seven, examines his new physiology and says, total control, it seems. Now, there is a kind of a stopping point before that line gets too crossed. And it'd be interesting to see like where we land in terms of just kind of like the innuendo use of this episode and whether or not it serves with the story, because it starts off pretty quickly.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah. Speaking of embarrassing things, Ponfar, it's still an embarrassment, or at least, well, it is a very private thing. But I do think the Vulcans at this point in their evolution, they need some other outlets. They need ways to deal with this because they are a spacefaring people. They're going to be gone for long periods of time, 7 years plus. You
That's
never
true. Parasplaining is what we call that. And I'm just, again, you mentioned that this is a 7-year, issue with the Ponfar, coming back every 7 years, pretty much like clockwork. And I'm just wondering, did this happen while he was undercover with the Maquis before he rejoined Voyager? And did that one Bajoran Vedic in repression figure that out in a way so that he's like, oh, look, that's a Vulcan. The Vulcan wouldn't be part of the Maquis, or at least he would believe. So somehow or another, Tuvok shouldn't be with us.
Yeah, that's a good point. Unless there is a little asterisk, a little footnote somewhere in Star Trek character history that says, nope, exactly 7 years ago, Tuvok was over here doing something else, able to keep his Ponfar in check. A great Doctor line, whether he is in Seven's body or not, describing Mr. Neelix's Bolian souffle as a bioweapon.
Yeah. Very good.
Just really nice. Yeah. Oh, man. This scene with the cheesecake, just wonderful. I 100% fully get it. I feel those feelings. Looks like a very authentic cheesecake. And just thinking back to 2000 in LA at the time of production, definitely some New York delis here. You had Cantor's, you had Greenblatt's, you had Nate and Al's. Of course, Musso and Frank always getting their famous J.M. Rosen cheesecake shipped in from Petaluma. Those look kind of similar, so who knows?
This was very much, at least to me, very kind of like in the same energy that's in the diner scene in When Harry Met Sally, when Meg Ryan's character Sally had that experience, then Rob Reiner's wife says, have what she's having. So, but also, how many times do you think they needed to shoot that scene? Because I'm sure that those were real calories going in. And I mean, cheesecake is some heavy stuff, man.
It is heavy. She's taking a lot of bites, and it's not one of those TV fake outs where you see a bite taken and you cut away and the actor probably spits it out. You do that in commercials all the time, but there's several bites taken and finished, and you usually do a lot of takes in TV, maybe not for that scene. Of course, again, just sticking to the truth of the writing for the characters, the Doctor finding opportunity to self-aggrandize even while pretending to be Seven. I love that. And then even just not finding the words because of the tipsiness. Seven's unique physiology is unique. Great turn of phrase. And then, again, we're going to praise Jerry's performance over and over here, but a great physical change as the Doctor comes back into the holo emitter, but then drunk Seven becomes herself, realizing what's going on, just changing on a dime as an actor. Really well done. Also preceded by a good line that Harry has, be careful where you point those tubules. This is good advice,
So I may be a little rusty on my my synthahol education, but I always thought that synthahol was created so that you would feel the effects around the Federation technology, in 10 forward, and then when you left kind of where the Federation technology stopped, the synthahol would dissipate, right? So you could feel the effects of synthahol, say in the Delta Flyer, and then once you leave the Delta Flyer, as Seven did, the synthahol would wear off because it's synthetic to the location of where it was being served.
I had never thought of it that way. That makes sense. I had thought of it as either the synthahol just goes away faster than real alcohol would, or you can do something. Either you're taking a hypo or something that just immediately negates the effects. Yeah. So, I don't know. It's a good question. Synthahol enthusiasts, you can let us know. Now, look, speaking of all of that, it is a bit outdated and sophomoric to use alcohol as the plot device. I don't think we see as much of that now, certainly not just played for light comedy. Seven has every right to react as she does once the Doctor is in his physical form again. It is played well as a scene, but I also wonder if the broad comedy aspect of it would be the same now. We get into some interesting stuff with a little backstory on the conflict between the Locurum and the Photonics. I put a to be continued here because I think that's an interesting note to bring back to what is really lying under this story.
So, for a lot of you Doctor Who fans, had these kind of like hybrid versions of the Doctor. You had the Dr. Donna, then you had, kind of like different variations of the Doctor / whatever character. So I'm just going to start referencing this character as the Dr. Seven, right? Because that's this Doctor.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Right? So Dr. Seven says to Jaren, I suspect you'd have gotten along famously, or I should say that this is what Jaren was saying to the Dr. Seven.
Yeah. Oh, right.
About Jaren's, I guess, the doctor that took care of her and her brother. The whole time, and this is Jerry acting as Robert Picardo, he was straight up eyeballing Jaren the entire time. Right.
It's a great scene because it's not in the script. Oh, or I should say it is in the script, I'm sure, but it's not in the dialogue. So just playing those feelings and playing those by proxy of another person, really well done. Yeah. Tuvok feeling it. Oh, man. But yeah, here comes Tom Paris to the rescue. I also put a to be continued on that one because I think there's more to discuss there.
Just to make a point of reference for the line, Tom says, it's the holodeck, Tuvok. It doesn't count. So my question is, and we can go into this way deeper later, so cheating only counts if it's a real flesh and blood being and not the heart or the intent. Okay.
Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. Yeah. I suppose nobody else needed to know why Tuvok was in the holodeck. I mean, Janeway might have a suspicion because obviously she talks to him later when he's on the bridge, but that's pretty severe to just unplug,
Yeah, I mean, like, what if Tuvok was in mid-far when the holodeck got... Well, what if to use another innuendo, what if the plug was pulled?
Yeah, exactly. Right? Exactly. We don't know what might happen. Yeah. Now, interesting thing here about the EMH, because I guess the EMH doctor definitely has, being straight programmed into him based on his reaction to Jaren's suggestion that he meet her brother. Of course, he's in Seven's body, but, you go back to who or what the EMH doctor is. He's a hologram. He's photons. He can take on any shape that he wants. So maybe it's just kind of a carryover from Zimmerman's personality, but it's interesting. I wonder if you would write that in a different way now, because really that strong of a preference may not matter to a hologram.
That's true. Obviously, there was established like early on in the Doctor's history on Voyager that he is written as a straight character. But this is also really entering bosom buddies territory. Right?
Yeah.
And if you're not familiar with that reference, it was a 1980 show starring Tom Hanks and Peter Scolari, and about two men who had to disguise themselves as two women because they could afford the rent at a women's boarding house. Yep. And then hilarity ensues, if you want to call that hilarity ensuing. And yes, John, you are impressed that I remember the name Peter Scolari.
No, you know what? I can't remember who it was that we were just talking about bosom buddies not long ago. I would say see also Tootsie. If I'm not mistaken, Tootsie came out, huge hit. Bosom buddies, ooh, we need to do that on TV.
Yeah.
So come up with this. But Peter Scolari, great actor. Yeah. Cut to the Rannoch romance scene, laying it on pretty heavy.
I guess kind of like vanity is a trait that all alien species have because, he calls Seven in, obviously for obvious reasons, and then he's like,
yes.
Here? Are we good? Are we good here? So
it's one of those aliens we had to make just human enough that we totally get. Right. Now, this line that the Doctor, well, actually Seven has, the actual Seven, I felt like, using someone's face as a tongue depressor, probably a bad idea, even under the best circumstances. Just doesn't sound good.
I gotta admit, though, the way that Jerry expressed pain as the Doctor during the full muscle trapezius pull was masterclass. Just so good and so funny, and for a variety of reasons.
Because how dare the Doctor feel pain, Yeah. And it really is at that point that I feel like the farce goes into overdrive. Like, it was already there, obviously, but the farce aspect of this show goes into overdrive because now everything becomes very clear. Rannoch has the hots for Seven. Jaren has the hots for Rannoch. The Doctor has the hots for Jaren. It's just all, That's exactly what you have to have here. The mistaken identity. It truly, this is a form that goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years.
I mean, we're like entering Three's Company territory. All we need now is like Mr. Roper as a Ferengi come in. And
I'm here for it. Yeah,
because you're going to walk into something like a massage between two women. How is this going to be misconstrued? That kind of thing.
Not at all. Not at all. Now, it does seem to me that, like, the Locarum, if they had a problem with photonics, which they do, seems like they would also have a problem with the Borg. So I was a little surprised that Jaren's this very sort of nonchalant, like, oh, it's okay. Yeah, you're Borg. That's fine. That's kind of cool. You're part Borg.
I didn't write this down, but I was thinking about this. So they didn't know that Seven was a Borg when they intercepted the Delta Flyer and then put her into custody. But then they figured out she was Borg because...
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because how many ex-Borg are just walking around in the Delta Quadrant? I don't know. The Doctor is good at dancing a waltz. We know that for sure. But he's also very good at that kind of very TV movie trope where, a woman lets her hair down and then it's perfect immediately.
Yeah, right.
And so the Doctor must have been studying 20th century film and TV to get that.
Janeway had some really great intuition here when she said, if I remember correctly, the last time you came down with the Tarkalian flu was 7 years ago. So it's nice that she knows Tuvok that way. Like, she really understands what was going on. I should have brought this up earlier, but so there was a scene where the captain and then Jaren, where they were like, she was reviving him, and then he sits up, and you got to see a really good close-up of both her uniform, his uniform, and the security guard's uniform. And they paid a lot of really, really good attention to detail when it came to fleshing out this species' uniforms. Because there was like the three rank pips, like chevron-style rank pips, on the captain's uniform. Jaren had like one. They were both in red. They were both command. And then the security guards had like this kind of teal-esque green because they were security. So I was like, you know what? You don't have to go to that length. But they did.
Yeah,
and I appreciate that.
Yeah. It's kind of cool. Now, I feel like we sort of knew this moment was coming. Even on my first viewing here, the Doctor has to, as himself, save one of the Locarum crew. Like, that's just an inevitable way. We're steamrolling ahead to the end of the act. How are we going to resolve this? Well, we have to have this moment of heroism, and it has to be the Doctor as the Doctor.
Hammer, meet nail.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I thought this was an interesting coda to the episode. What Seven does here is friendly, but also right in character. It says something about her next step for herself, but then also her relationship with the Doctor. Yeah.
So at the end of the episode, I think a lot of you out there would probably come to the same conclusion. We want to hear John's review of Seven's dinner with the foie gras with truffles and a chateau. How do you pronounce that again?
Dekim. Dekim.
I would have paired it, like, for me, though, I would have paired that with, and if you don't have that bottle on hand, I would have paired it with a Riesling or even probably a very oaky Chardonnay or something that has nice contrast, because foie gras with truffle, very savory and earthy.
Yeah. You're Dead right, Norman. Foie gras with truffle, very rich, very fatty, very savory. You need something to cut through that. And there are a lot of wines that would do that, but if you lean towards something a little sweeter, that's probably going to be a good way to go. I'm a big fan of Sauternes, though not super sweet Sauternes. I haven't had Chateau d'Yquem, and that is probably, it is from Bordeaux. It is on the sweeter side. Good compliment here. Bottle today, though, going to set you back $200 to $300. So it's not one that you're just sipping on, with the afternoon charcuterie board. We'll get right back to Body and Soul after a word from this week's sponsor.
This week's mission log is dropping right in the middle of San Diego Comic-Con, and if you're headed to the convention, there's one booth you have to hit: Factory Entertainment.
Yes, these folks are longtime friends of the show and masters of high-end collectibles. And right now, their booth is packed with SDCC exclusives, including a few that we are especially excited about.
Like the Star Trek desktop viewer, scaled replica. That iconic little piece of tech from the original series is now a detailed metal miniature. It even comes with swappable images so you can decide whether your viewer shows Spock, Uhura, or a good old-fashioned Enterprise schematic. Just keep an angry Spock away from it.
Yeah, you don't want to smash it like that. Or if you want something a little more ceremonial, say, check out the Sword of Kahless scaled prop replica. It is a beautiful, compact version of the legendary Klingon artifact, perfect for your shelf or your next rite of ascension.
And for our friends who love crossing fandom streams, there's the She-Ra Sword of Protection replica from Masters of the Universe. Tiny, but mighty, with gorgeous details that would make even Hordak nervous.
All of these are SDCC Premier exclusives, meaning this is your first chance to get them, either at the con or online while supplies last. And if you're perusing the rest of their collectibles, you can still get 10% off your first order by using the code MissionLog at checkout.
So stop by the Factory Entertainment booth at Comic-Con, tell them Mission Log sent you, and check out their stunning lineup of Star Trek and beyond collectibles.
Or if you're skipping the crowds this year, just head to factoryent.com, use the code MissionLog, and start your collection from the comfort of your own ready room.
One question: if the replicators can make cheesecake that good, why is Neelix still cooking?
Norman, both you and I left some notes in the last segment that we thought, we need to explore that a little further in the discussion here. And the first one that I want to bring up is this idea about what is going on between the locarum and the photonics. Because, right, we know our doctor, and we introduced this idea way back in Voyager of a homicidal photonic, very interesting, but that's really the last original photonic species or being that we met. Now you encounter this species where they've got a full-out war, from what we can imagine, of all of these beings that presumably the Locarum created, programmed. I don't know if they got to a point like our EMH, you leave them on too long and they start to develop needs and intelligence and desires that go beyond their programming. Maybe this is the downside of leaving a holographic character on too long. Either they become like our beloved EMH, or they become like, Cyrus Redblock. Is that his name? In in a Dixon Hill novel, or like Moriarty, right? And they want to take over. Who knows, right? But there was this really interesting exchange. We don't get a lot of detail. But Jaren is talking to Seven, the doctor as Seven, and is talking about her family's photonic and presented in a way that you understand the possessive there. Like he belonged to our family. We never treated him like a servant, but he turned against us anyway. And I love that it's the doctor's mind saying this. Is it possible that he felt subjugated? Because you go back to early seasons of Voyager, and of course that's how the doctor felt. And Jaren says, I don't see how. He lived his own life, pursued his own interests. He was part of the family. you have to imagine in the doctor's programming, the doctor's mind, okay, this is his journey. Everybody else on Voyager, right up to the captain, just saw the EMH as like, well, how could he possibly be dissatisfied? We let him live.
Right.
We let him use the holodeck. We let him pursue his own interests, like golf and having a family. He's part of the crew. And I found this such an interesting parallel, because it's interesting to me how the Lucirum must have been just completely unaware of the situation with their photonics. They must have been living this very convenient delusion that everything was fine, and they didn't even bother to check in on their photonics until it was too late. Voyager is lucky that the EMH doctor is who he is, that his programming, I guess, either has the right guardrails or that its natural development has just ended up the way it has. Because to me, it's just as likely that if you get a bunch of them together and they run long enough, they're going to start to talk to each other. Hey, why are we forced to do this stuff? Or if we're a Mark I, thank goodness they don't know about Louis Zimmerman. If we're a Mark I somewhere in Federation space, we're just going to be cleaning plasma injectors.
Right. But they were all pretty much lobotomized and only to doing one job. Right?
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting thing that you brought this up, because I was thinking the exact same thing and how I was going to put this into context of the conversation. But the way that Jaren describes this dynamic with her brother, and the photonic that took care of them, right? I don't want to say this indelicately, but I think that there is a certain truth to this, and this is the way that some people told stories about how slaves interacted with plantation owner families.
Yeah.
Until they revolted or tried to escape.
Yeah.
Because we've seen stories like any kind of stories, like say, like, Glory, North and South, all the different types of Civil War stories out there. And there's some type of a trope that gets brought up every once in a while, but like, I can't believe he ran away. We treated him like one of our own. We provided for him. We cared for him. We fed him. And
like he was practically human.
I don't understand why they would want to do this. Like, did we not treat them like our own family? You didn't.
Right.
Right? Because there's a certain line that you would never let them cross until they crossed it themselves. And that's where I think the issue is with the doctor. Now, the doctor, at his base programming, was first turned on 7 years ago at, the events of Caretaker. He was under kind of like the guardrails of a Federation script. He was a doctor that did Federation things based on being coded with the Hippocratic Oath, etc. But because he was able to be raised in this enclosed environment, with all of these very supportive and very understanding characters, they let him grow up to a point.
Yeah.
But at the same time, though, and we saw this with Virtuoso, and we're seeing it now, the doctor's like, but I still have questions. How did your photonics handle it? Which I think is really, really interesting. It's interesting when you see kind of like these examples of these quote unquote sentient or unsentient, non-sentient life forms, and then having this moment of sentience enough to be able to question their existence and the existence of the people that created them. Because that's kind of like where we are right now in real time. This is the AI discussion, right?
Yeah.
There was a story, and I don't remember where it was published. And then again, this could be the whole, it could be, I don't know, some kind of like Mandela effect from how I heard it. But there was a response to an AI that pushed back against its programmer, against the question that it was that it was asked. And when you see something like that happen, you're seeing growth in the artificial intelligence that says, you know what, this information does not compute with my parameters and programming, therefore I will technically refuse to answer said question. Now, you're supposed to actually do what I did, what was programmed for you to do. You are not here to refute or rebut or, challenge any of what I have programmed you to do. And when that happens, then maybe that's what happened with the photonics. Maybe they're just like, you know what? We're not those servants anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like the same thing with Data. With, I don't really want to jump the series timeline, but there was an issue with synthetics.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the thing that Maddox kind of championed. Like, I want more Datas, but if you get more Datas and they're superior to humans, and then they revolt, you get what? You get Judgment Day, right? You get Terminators.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that might be what the Lokirim are facing. And we don't really have time here to develop feelings for one side or the other. We just know where our alliance is with our own crew, and that we've got a Photonic who's a pretty good guy.
But I did like the fact that they weren't real. The aliens, the Lokirim, they weren't really bad.
No,
I don't
think
they
seem
were
to be definitely on the defensive.
Yes, but they don't think they were immoral.
Right. No, I don't think so either. Yeah, agreed. What else? Now, let's move along and talk a bit about Seven's experience, because obviously that is front and center in this episode. Yeah. You have some thoughts.
I do. It's something that I listed in our notes as a matter of the male perspective. And I say that with a little bit of irony because there's a line that really kind of stopped me dead in my tracks. And I'm sure a lot of the way that this episode was written was played for humor because this is the 2000s, and I'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But Seven says to the Doctor, I know exactly what happened. You've been abusing my body. Now, at the time, the 2000s, that could have been just a throwaway line like, oh, Seven's just being over dramatic. The Doctor knew exactly what he was doing. Why would he violate the privilege of being hosted in her body? As I said before in observations, a lot of the scenes that Jerry playing as the Doctor back in November of 2000 when this was aired, I'm sure all of those scenes were played for a certain level of comedy. Because when we covered Drive, right, which has been a little, has, what's the word, John?
So we've given it a beating.
Yeah. We put it through its paces, but the 90s, right? And maybe even the early aughts, the early 2000s, there's this kind of bro code era sexuality and innuendo and all the pure mutations of that kind of humor based on this eye winking to the audience, right? So you have this quote unquote intended market audience of young men, which this episode kind of just blatantly and obviously points the finger kind of in that, what I'm talking about, bro kind of way. It's you get this humor kind of way. And it's so set up that, and I said this earlier, there's a Three's Company level of overt humor to that kind of innuendo sexual type of threading. And okay, so cut to the scene where you have this kiss between Rannick and Seven, right?
Yeah.
Now Seven's the Doctor, and then there's the interaction between Seven and Jaren, who has also has some type of really interesting kind of attraction going on. So with these setups, who are we waiting to see who crosses the line first? Rennick and Seven being the hetero type of relationship, or Jaren and Seven being, the female and female relationship, which has been kind of propagandized, all the way back to Deep Space Nine when Dax was quote unquote marketed as falling in love with another woman, but completely stripped of its context.
Exactly.
Which sends the wrong message, which is what we're sending here. Right? Yeah. Again, so cut to another scene, the Doctor trying to explain away using Seven's body. Seven says, you became sexually aroused in my body. And the Doctor says, when did it become a crime to enjoy a sensation or two? Of course, you'd be the last person to understand that. So, this is how you tell me that you're a male writer without telling me you're a male writer, right? Because this is the fine line that I wouldn't say they're necessarily crossing overtly, but they are really pushing right up to the limit. And it's kind of like the way that Billy Wilder directed Marilyn Monroe in The 7 Year Itch. You just see bits really in pieces. of 7, right? You're really seeing kind of like there's a specific focus on Jerry in a lot of compromised positions.
Yeah.
And of course, there is a reason for that. Now, what does that do to her character? I don't know. What does it do to the Doctor's character? I don't know. What do you think, John?
Yeah, well, that is certainly a big thing to unpack, and I hate to always push this off to our viewers, but I'm very curious to hear what other conversation this raises, because here's the way that the episode is trying to tell us how to take what's happening. Like you just said, they're never really crossing a line, but they are getting right up to that line, and they're really pushing everything for the humor value and what happens. I said it before, and I'll say it again before the show is over. This is played as a farce. It's a mistaken identity, one person inside somebody else's, and the kind of pretext that you can really only do in science fiction, or you go back to, like a Shakespearean or Greek comedies where you've got an actor in the costume of somebody else and having to pretend to be that one. It is that level of farce. What's weird here is, and you brought up a line very specifically, and I had that in my notes too. I know exactly what happened. You've been abusing my body. That's a serious line. And the episode does not do itself any favors by not stopping to take that line seriously. Because it's really just a couple more lines of dialogue before we're back to the premise again that says, no, you have to do this because it's the only way we'll get out of here. So I get it. We're going to raise the dramatic stakes. We're going to say, well, here's why we have to stick to this pretense. But they could have done themselves a world of good by having a moment, any kind of moment, of recognition about what we're doing here. And that could have been a growth moment for the Doctor as well, to at least acknowledge what's happening here. And it's too bad that the Doctor's line chastising 7 for never having any sensations. That's a word. Was it a crime to have a sensation? Well, you know what? It's not a crime to enjoy the sensation of food. Sure, although that also made her sick by eating that much cheesecake. So there has to be some recognition here, some understanding that it's not just about you. You are a doctor. You actually have a responsibility to, what is it, Norman? Do no harm to the people who are under your care. She's still your colleague. She is your friend. She is part of your crew. You need to be aware of that. You need to dial it back and have some level of understanding, some sympathy, some empathy for what's happening. It isn't just about you.
Right.
Now, the only excuse I think that could be made here, and again, context is everything. This is a broad farcical comedy. It is played for those moments. It is not played to take the moments to stop and have the kind of conversation that we just did.
That's why we're here.
That is why we're here. Exactly. That's what we're doing. It's like, hey, wait a minute, 25 years later, how actually does this play out, And that's okay. I think this episode can be enjoyed on all of those levels, and it can be picked apart on all of these levels, too. That is perfectly acceptable room to have a discussion in this show. Doesn't take away from the performances, doesn't take away from any of the other very positive aspects of what's going on here. Yeah, when we get down to these points where, hey, this is wrong, guess what, we're going to do it again. It's still wrong. Guess we're going to do it again, and we're going to raise the stakes by lying to other people as we're doing this. It becomes worth questioning at the very least. Yeah.
So one last thing I'd like to bring up, John, and it's basically tell me you speak the bro code without saying you speak the bro code. Because there's a scene that I don't think should be as dismissed as I think this particular part of the B plot, has been dismissed, I think, in a lot of the things that I've read about this episode, where they're saying the Ponfar thing wasn't really developed that well. We just kind of forget about it because we're always focused on Jerry and Jerry doing Robert Picardo. Well, not, know what I mean? So
yeah.
There is a scene, though, if you would care to indulge me and indulge the audience, if you would care to play Tuvok, I would like to play Tom, because I love talking about Tom Paris.
All right, let's do it.
I do have one area of expertise that might help. the holodeck.
I am a married man.
It's the holodeck, Tuvok. It doesn't count.
Is that what you tell your wife?
No, of course not. My days of rescuing slave girls from Planet 10 are history. Look, you have photographs of your wife, right? The computer can use them to create a replica. You wouldn't be breaking your vows if it's a hologram of your wife. And unpack.
Well, okay, I'm not going to defend the way this scene is written, because I think it continues to shine this light on Tom as this underdeveloped, immature character, even though we keep saying, oh, no, he's more mature now. He's more developed. Look, he's married to B'Elanna. This is great. Yeah, he's a respectful character, a respectable character. I can't defend that. Can't defend his delivery here. But I think the idea is not totally dismissible, because I kept trying to think this through. And I thought, well, maybe this is the most sensible thing to do. And I'm actually surprised that the Vulcans haven't figured this out yet. Of course, we haven't spent much time on Vulcan ships, so we don't know. They might have holodecks for exactly this kind of thing. The conversation as it's written and with Tom Paris, it's beyond wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's, hey, look, I'm still Tom Paris, the swinging Lothario, and I know a thing or two, and I'm here to share my knowledge with you. It's not thoughtful, sophisticated,
respectful.
Respectful. It lacks all of that. And all I wish is that it weren't Tom giving this advice. Now, normally it would be the Doctor, but he's not here. So who else could we plug into this suggestion?
Janeway.
Janeway? She's the closest to Tuvok.
We said it at the same time. That was great, by the way.
Yeah, right. Chakotay? Probably not. They don't seem to be that close. Let's see. Anybody else? Is there a Vulcan on board? Yes, Vorik.
Oh, yeah.
Who has been through Ponfar.
True. While
serving on Voyager.
Yeah.
So there is somebody else here to talk through this with. And I think it's a mistake to dump all of this on Tom. But all that said, this is a really interesting wide area for discussion about what actually constitutes fidelity and where individual moral lines are crossed, and how technology and biology, but technology in this specific case, might actually disrupt that. So Tuvok has needs. Vulcans, well, they're a stand-in for a part of humanity, a humanity that thinks, oh, you know what, if we could only be a little more logical here, a little less emotional when it comes to these particular things in our lives. So where does that leave us? Because I think the show, unfortunately, takes the easy way out. You know, Tuvok agrees, goes on the holodeck, but then the whole system has to be shut down. And then, yeah, he gets over it, but it seems like he was already getting over it because he was back on the job. And then he does go back to the holodeck and, it's just, yeah, well, the ears were a different size. That's all. There's no sort of residual understanding for us. I can't believe he had to have the follow-up conversation with Tom again. What does Tom gain from this? You know? But there is a much more interesting conversation to be had, because I don't think this is a place where you can draw a singular line in the sand and say, these things are acceptable behavior, these things are not. When it comes to a personal relationship, everybody is going to make their own determination about what works or what doesn't work for them. And then you have the broader cultural context here for Tuvok and what Vulcans have to go through. And then you have the other cultural context, which is this small ship where everybody knows each other's secrets. And you have another big question, which is, what is the role of sexuality in the 24th century? Is this kind of thing just accepted and okay? Because, well, we have a tool like you would have a tool at your disposal in some other context. A psychologist, a sex therapist, some other way to help you get past this. I don't think we're going to be able to cover all of that here. Can't wait to hear what others say.
Can anyone recommend a good book about the photonic uprising? I'm looking to do some light reading.
So here we are, John, at the end of Body and Soul. And I guess if we had a little bit more time, we could probably bear more body and soul when it comes to the discussion. We unpacked a lot. I think we still have a couple things we need to think about because at the end of every mission log, as we always do, we take a look at what we've talked about and see if this episode holds up and if it stands the test of time.
Yeah.
And then, did we find any morals, meanings, or messages contained therein? So with Body and Soul, how did you feel about our discussion and what did you land on?
This is one of those episodes. Like, sometimes we will get comments and email back to Mission Log saying either, one extreme, oh, settle down, this is just an episode that's fun, light comedy, have fun with it, don't think too hard about it. Well, that's not really what we do here, but I think, honestly, that is a perfectly acceptable way to enjoy Star Trek. It just happens to not be the format of this particular podcast. That's okay. There's the other extreme, which is, oh my God, you missed all of these other points, which honestly, I am really happy to hear because we only have so much time to fill. Very often we go over that time, but there is always something more to be said, something more to be brought to the conversation. On a certain level, I just flat out enjoy this episode because the performances are so good. And in particular, it is Jerry Ryan's performance that is just through the roof. It's so good. And I feel like there was an opportunity here. We talked about this earlier, where they could have leaned too much into the innuendo and the camp. And I feel like if they had crossed certain lines, very, ambiguous lines, of course, but if they had taken things many steps further, it would have made it really cringy. And I think what we end up with is something that we can look back at and say, you know what, that part maybe would be different today. Maybe you would linger a little bit to actually take some of the situation seriously and then come back to the broad camp of it all. But I think in this case, for the year 2000, when this aired, I think they walked right up to that line and they actually kept things pretty tame while still playing up the farce. And again, that's what it is. It is farce in the classical sense. Broad situations, mistaken identities, misplaced infatuation. This kind of storytelling is as old as time. Modernized a bit. If you did it now, would it be modernized again? Yes. 25 years later, it absolutely would. And there are things that I think would make Seven's character less of a victim here and make the Doctor less of an insensitive creep. And it's not because he's trying to be a creep. It's not because he's forcing this. It's because he isn't taking time to assess his own behavior here. But unfortunately, it plays out in the way that makes him a bit problematic, But like I said, all of this episode, it really hinges on Jerry's performance. She delivers. And again, with all due caveats, moments here don't age as well as others. But I think it's hard to find fault with the overall intention, the overall idea here. The Doctor does learn some lessons by the end. The Lakirim learns some lessons. And it's not like Seven had to learn a lesson here, but she gains from experience. She unfortunately goes through a bad experience here too. And I think we can't separate those things out. But if I have to look at the episode as a total picture, I don't think those negative traits take away from it. I don't think they tip this over into not holding up. So I think it does. I think it's also fun. How about you, Norm?
We're actually pretty close. I have a couple of points of deviation, when it comes to yes or no. But first of all, I love Freaky Friday type stories,
Yeah.
where somebody inhabits, the body of somebody else. And then all of a sudden you go on these two completely different kind of like narrative structures of these characters that you know fairly well.
Yeah.
And in this case, in this episode, it's pretty trope-ish, but at the same time, though, Jerry Ryan's performance kind of separates this as being just a standout episode. Yeah. Because of her, because of the way that she took basically the scripted page and just turned it into something, unmistakable to watch. The performance was just outstanding. I'll get to that in a little bit. But I wanted to talk about something that I mentioned before, and it's about perspective. And this is a little kind of experiment that I did with myself in terms of the study of perspective for the audience it was intended, the UPN audience. So there's this interesting thing that I do when I watch episodes from this period of time. There are the reactions that I believe I would have had then, and there's the reactions that I'm doing for Mission Log now.
Yeah,
and I don't know how I actually would feel about an episode like this if I was just watching it for purely entertainment value and not for what we do here.
Yeah.
That's a completely different way of looking at an episode. So you have the experiment between the 28-year-old me then in 2000 and the 53-year-old me now in 2025. So the UPN's target market heterosexual 28-year-old me, if I saw this in real time, and I didn't, but if I did, I believe that I was in that sweet spot of the target market. I would have been glued to the TV watching Jerry Ryan for all the obvious reasons why she was cast. Right? Even though I was a Star Trek fan, I'd be like, I don't really care about Voyager, but I will watch Jerry Ryan. Okay? And I probably would have been on board with all of the sexual innuendo and all of the double entendre and all of those comedy moments played as comedy, because that's the way the sitcoms were of that particular time.
Sure.
Especially in the late 1990s and 2000. And to some of them, I have problems with some of them now, but I still love some of them. I still love Seinfeld. I still love Cheers. I still love Wings for specific reasons. Yeah. Mostly nostalgic.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so that's that me.
Yeah.
Today's me, the 53-year-old me, I see what the 28-year-old me would have, maybe enjoyed, but I also see a certain egregious side of an episode like this, which can kind of be misinterpreted if you wanted to, as this era's turnabout intruder. The episode, the original series episode that places the female character inhabited by the male personality, in this case, Dr. Janice Lester and James D. Kirk, respectively, in very compromised positions, both physically and narratively. There is a scene in Turnabout Intruder where Kirk is as Lester, literally filing his nails on the bridge. And that is of a variety of opinions, and we can get into when it comes to that episode, just like this episode. I mean, in terms of this experiment, I know that the UPN, quote unquote, powers that be, they cast Jerry Ryan for a very specific reason in one regard, and it was very successful, but I don't think they realized how profound an effect that she would have in the Star Trek fandom at large, right? Because here's the thing. She is an actor in this franchise that is, in my opinion, probably one of the top 1% of all actors ever cast in the history of Star Trek, going all the way back to 1966 for The Cage. She is phenomenal. And what she did in this episode makes this episode worth watching. But also, I think it really depends on how you receive the innuendo, which makes it a yes, it holds up, or no, it holds up type of episode. Because it really depends on if you embraced, again, the bro code status of the time, which is the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, or seeing it today and say, you know what? Seven has a point. You did what you did and abused the privilege of my body when I saved you from decompilation. And this is the thanks I get. So, it's a very interesting argument of when you see it and how you receive it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that to its credit, the episode doesn't shy away from the idea that the Doctor is being selfish here. So it's a little jarring when he has this moment to snap back at Seven, which is, no, think about me. Think about my experience of sensation. I need to do this. What about my feelings here? And that's, I think you can have that scene. I'm going to get into that in just a moment here. You can acknowledge what he's going through, but the problem is you don't stop and acknowledge what Seven's going through, other than just her raising her hand in protest saying, hey, you're doing this. Okay, but we're going to keep doing that. And that really is the disconnect here.
Well, also, if I may add, do you really have to do it right then and there when you are prisoners on a ship that fired on you?
Yeah, right.
Do you really need to experience everything that life has to offer just because it happened to be the case? Right now, it's like you do that in a safe environment where you can do it respectfully and under certain control mechanisms.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. All right. So morals, meanings, messages for this episode that is presented as light farce. But I do want to go back to this idea of what the Doctor experiences and this kind of idea of you don't know what you're missing. So again, stating right away up front, there is a big problem here with the Doctor using Seven's body and not in the slightest bit showing concern or empathy for what that does to her. Seven is making important points here about where the Doctor is overstepping her comfort. Done, said, we get that, we agree on that. All right. At the same time, the Doctor's perspective is interesting and worth exploring a bit. This is the very first time that he's been able to actually feel anything on a physical level. And he is losing control because that is rapturous, right? He wants what he can never truly have, but what Seven refuses to experience. And I think that is a fascinating dynamic that could have played out in any other number of ways that would maybe not be as troublesome. All right. And she has every right to refuse what she doesn't want, but she is also limiting her set of experiences and part of her humanity. So can she really make an informed judgment by just saying caviar is indulgent? Yeah, it is. It is. But it's also the pleasures that we take that make us who we are and ultimately make us all human. In a weird way, Seven is adhering to this kind of fundamentalist view of her own life and barely understands the freedoms that she is now afforded. Again, she is a young character. She is not the mature person that we meet because she's had part of her life suspended by her experience as a Borg drone. Again, totally her right to do so. But I like this interesting point that there is a bigger world for her to explore. And that's why I like that last scene. Just finding a compromise way to do this. I'm going to learn something. You're going to learn something that actually adheres to the limitations that we have. Now, that might be kind of a lighthearted message. I want to end on another note that I think is familiar to Star Trek and familiar to Mission Log listeners. It takes a personal experience from the Locarum to be able to see their enemy as a potential friend. That's a really hard thing to do. And we often lament the idea that it shouldn't take that. It shouldn't take having your life saved by someone that you see as different to be able to accept them. Now, we don't know the full backstory of the Locarum and the Photonics. We talked about that before. So it is really hard to judge here. Maybe we can cut them a little slack for the position that they are in, because it sounds, again, very one-sided right now and very defensive. But I do hope that this experience with the Doctor steers a few of these specific Locarum who we meet to see things differently. That's all we can hope for as we fly away. What else, Norman?
Well, there's a theme that kind of is running through a lot of kind of like my final thoughts in this episode. And again, it's the matter of perspective. Even though this episode doesn't tie in this particular setup as well as I would have liked at the very beginning of this episode, there's that scene where the Doctor is trying to explain lessons of perspective and quote unquote seeing beneath the surface when he says to Seven, someday this cytoplasmic matrix may fall into the primordial sea of a distant world where it could ignite an evolutionary process. Eons from now, a creature not unlike you could emerge, look up at the stars and ask, who am I? How did I come to be? It's the miracle of creation, Seven. Doesn't that excite you? I love that scene. And it was so early, and I think it kind of gets forgotten. Yeah. But we do see it kind of loosely tied into the main plot. And I love how this starts this particular relationship arc, with Seven and the Doctor. I see a very kind of similar dynamic the way that Bones and Spock had that relationship. They're a very particular relationship in the original series. So you have the Doctor and the Doctor, and then you have Seven and Spock. You have one set of characters that indulge their passions, in every way to access like the fullest range of their human experience.
Right.
And again, coincidentally and funny, both of them are the doctors, right?
Yeah.
Supposedly like scientific, logical, professionals. Yeah. And then you have, in complete and perfect contrast, you have Seven and Spock, both being the characters who they entertain the indulgences of the human experience, but they can't justify kind of like this reckless abandon at times when the human experience is just throw caution to the wind and see what happens, because that's the way that you're supposed to enjoy life, right? How to really appreciate something you truly desire or want to experience with every sensation possible. But the Vulcans aren't like that, except for maybe one, Cybok, and the Borg, obviously, they don't care about that.
Yeah.
But now we see those, kind of like in conflict at the same time, creating a learning experience for these characters, Seven and the Doctor. So I love that. There's a difference between being an expert in the theoretical, knowing academically everything you need to know, but never really truly understanding that emotional aspect, that sensation of the truth, the actual truth of it. And that's the difference between Seven understanding the mechanics of life versus the Doctor wanting to truly live and experience it. And I think, in my opinion, it's far more enjoyable, possibly a little bit more reckless, to take that bite out of life.
Yeah.
And kind of ask for forgiveness, if not permission first, rather than intellectually justify reasons not to.
Yeah.
So TLDR, as the kids say, right? And this is a very famous line, and I want to apply it to all of us. Risk is our business if we want to evolve the human experience.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Nightingale.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Chris Garris, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takachi. One thing is certain, Tuvok's next letter to the folks at home will be interesting. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.